So Gumba Magan Gumba Nanigian and Du Yurigari State Library of Queensland Gu, which is good evening. It's good to see you in Barragum and welcome to the State Library of Queensland. Barragum is the traditional language of the community that I grew up on the Darling Downs. And good evening everyone, it's fantastic to see so many of you here this evening. My name is Vicky McDonald and it's my great privilege to be the State Librarian and CEO here at the State Library of Queensland. And on behalf of my colleagues, I welcome you this evening to Portrait of an Artist. I'd like to begin by acknowledging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and their continuing connection to land and as custodians of stories for millennia. Here at the State Library of Queensland, we are inspired by this tradition in our work to share and preserve Queensland's memory for future generations. I'd also like to extend a very warm welcome to our special guests for this evening, Richard Bell and Michael Aird, who are in the front row here, so welcome to both of you. Thank you. I also welcome James Sourris AM and Marika Sourris, long-term and generous supporters of the State Library, Helen Brodie, President of the Queensland Library Foundation, the Honourable Justice Thomas Bradley, who's also the Chair of the Brisbane Writers' Festival, a great partner with the State Library. And as I glanced around the room, I saw many people who have been featured in the Portrait of an Artist over the years. So Fiona Foley, Judy Watson, Luke Roberts, Michael Ether, Gordon Hookey, and Andrew Anatopoulos. So welcome to you all, and my apologies. My apologies if I didn't see someone else who's also been in Portrait of an Artist. And ladies and gentlemen, it certainly is fantastic to have you here as well. So tonight we meet an extraordinary Queenslander, artist and activist, Richard Bell. And we're thrilled that Richard is joining us here while he is in Australia. Richard now spends most of his time in Europe, and his last show was held in the prestigious main Turbine Hall at Tate Modern in London. But London is a far cry from Charleville, where Richard's story begins in 1953. Richard is the eldest of two brothers and is descended from the Kamilaroi, Kooma, Jiman and Gurang Gurang communities. His father was a drover and a cane cutter, and the family frequently moved in search of work. He began working life as an apprenticed toolmaker and was a fruit picker before moving to Redfern in 1974, aged 21. Redfern in the 1970s was the epicentre of a burgeoning Aboriginal activism movement, fighting for social justice and equality. After 10 years in Sydney, fully immersed in the movement, Richard returned with his young family to Queensland, where he became an administrator for Aboriginal services organisations. The late 1980s marked the start of Richard's remarkable artistic career. Initially, he created art for the tourist market alongside his brother Marshall. It was during this time that Richard also began producing serious art. An early work, Rock Art of Ages, was purchased by the Queensland Art Gallery in 1989 and exhibited the following year. However, it was back in Redfern in the year 2000 that a chance encounter would change the course of Richard's artistic life. A long conversation about art and politics with Michael Ether, owner of Brisbane's Fireworks Gallery, led to Richard being invited to work with Michael at his gallery. And this was where Richard devoted 12 hours a day experimenting with different approaches to produce artworks that allowed him to express his views and convey his messages. And he never looked back. In 2003, Richard won the prestigious Telstra National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Art Awards. That same year, he co-founded ProppaNOW with Vernon Arkey and Jennifer Hurd, creating an Indigenous artists collective designed to give voice to urban artists and challenge cultural stereotypes. ProppaNOW survives today, and many of those founding artist stories are held in the James C. Sourris AM collection of artist interviews. Richard's work has appeared in significant group and solo exhibitions, both here and overseas. And his works are held in many collections, such as the National Gallery of Australia, the Art Gallery of New South Wales, and the Museum of Contemporary Art Australia. But it is arguably his ongoing project Embassy, also known as Pay the Rent, which created in 2013, that has seen him gain international recognition. This installation has been presented in art festivals all over the world and became a major hit at Documenta 15 in Kassel, Germany in 2022. And of course, it was recently exhibited in the Tate Modern. And I understand that some of your friends were recently at the Tate Modern as well, with you, Richard, as well. Tonight's conversation will be led by Michael Aird, Research Fellow at the Australian Research Council and Director of the University of Queensland's Anthropology Museum. Michael trained as an anthropologist and has worked in the arts and cultural space for decades. He's also a renowned photographer and publisher in his own right. Michael has participated in Portrait of an Artist events in the past and has a deep understanding of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, history and art. Tonight we'll be using Slido for the Q&A session at the end of the conversation, and I encourage you to send in your questions using the QR code. You can see the QR code on the screen at the moment. It's very democratic. You can also vote on others' questions and they will go to the top of the list and Michael will be able to see them as well. So this is our final Portrait of an Artist event for the year, and the series would not be possible without the generous support of James C. Sourris AM and his sister Marika, who are among State Library's greatest supporters. And their support is enabling us to build an incredible documentary record of Queensland artists, a unique resource that is invaluable for future generations, and I think one that's being recognised for its international prestige as well. So thank you, James and Marika, for your support. I do encourage you as well to come back to State Library to view Extraordinary Stories on level 4, where compelling stories of ordinary Queenslanders are told using our rare heritage collections. You can also explore stories of Aboriginal stockmen and women in our Keural Dargan showcase, Working Country, which is located on level 1. Richard's interview for the James C. Sourris collection of artist interviews was filmed in 2011. So tonight's conversation will be a timely update on his incredible life story. So please enjoy the evening. Thank you.
I'm an activist masquerading as an artist. So I can get away with all sorts of stuff as an artist and not get arrested. You know, like every revolution, you know, has involved artists. Okay. So I'm thinking that that's not by accident. I'm classified in every institution in this country as an Aboriginal artist, and my work is deemed Aboriginal. Cool. Now that in itself is racist, because I came to art from tourist art, you know, and everything was filled, every line, every stroke. Whereas I was looking at the desert artists, you know, and just like they felt no problem letting the paint run out, you know, and then I found that it actually, you know, helped the work. It made them shimmer, you know, like. So you know, like I thought, oh damn, I'm gonna start painting like that, and that meant that was quicker. That fell within the realms of my artwork, you know, like, which is to make work efficiently, you know, with minimum of effort. Like my experience with tourist art, you know, I learned to paint really quickly anyway. So now I've developed styles of painting that look like they take forever, but you know, like I can do really quickly. I was doing these little things there, and this white dude comes up to me one day. And he said, he's looking over my shoulder. He said, "Why don't you get into fine art?" I said, "What do you mean? Look at this fine art. There's fine lines here. That's fine art, isn't it?" You know, "Well, you're a bit of an activist, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you know, you can reach a much bigger audience, you know, than you can ever do by marching down the street." I got the idea then to do some small things, you know, for tourist size things, you know, like just get them printed off set. So I did it, but I also did a couple of political things as well. I developed this new way of marketing. I looked at what was around in the shops, and what I noticed was that some of the white boys and girls were putting things images in a window, in a framed window, and then putting a backing board, you know, and a blurb about themselves on the back, right? So, and shrink wrapping them. So I said, damn, I'm going to do that, you know, with blackfella stuff, yeah. And it was, they were really successful. I would have sold, maybe 500,000. I think the ideas are really strong. Certainly, I'm challenging everybody to buy my work. You know, like I'm making it hard for. Well, I'm not challenging blackfellas to buy it, other than the fact that my dealer charges ridiculously high prices for them.
Yes, yes.
I constructed this painting for the Telstra Art Prize, and I told everybody that it would win. Before I even painted it, I was just skiting up and sort of blowing. Anyway, I finished it, and I didn't send it away because I got cold feet. I said, "What if it doesn't win?" So, but my daughter said, "Oh no, Dad, you got to send it away." So I sent it. It was the last work to arrive, and it was the first time that everybody in the gallery agreed that on what would win. One of the reasons for starting ProppaNOW was so that we had a united voice to speak out against the ethnicising of Aboriginal art, and in particular our position, like off, to the periphery, within Aboriginal art. We probably look for, overtly political,
right, yep.
And with a tough air, taking a very strong pro-Aboriginal stance. I would want people to look, immediately I want them to look deeply at the works and look for, look beneath the surface, of the direct statement, and contemplate, other meanings there. I believe in freedom for everybody, free thought.
Speech.
Yeah, free speech. But we have to be careful, about what we say. And I'm serious when I say that I'm a recovering racist and recovering sexist and recovering homophobe. Because that's how I was taught to be like that. So I've been trying to undo what I've been taught, and I think my life has become richer for it, and I'd like more people to do that.
Well, what's it like seeing yourself on the big screen, Richard?
Fuck, it's awful.
So I want to start with summing up, the year of 1988. You'd just moved to Brisbane, 1987, working in business, doing tourist art with your brother Marshall in this very street just down the road. You had your shop.
Little shop, yeah.
Expo 88 was happening, protests were happening, and you weren't really an artist yet, 1988.
Well, people would have said I was a bullshit artist.
So you had a sort of fast trajectory from there, So what were the politics? What was everything? What was happening in '88 that affected your life?
Obviously, there was the '88 celebrations that we went down to. I was there when Billy Craigie launched that book, into the harbour. There was a white guy who wrote a book about 200 years of white settlement, and he walked around all us blackfellas there protesting against, the colony celebrating 200 years, and he wanted one of us to launch his book.
Well, you know the answer, except for Billy Craig. He said, "Yeah, I'll launch your book." And he got the book, and he looked at the guy. He said, "You ready?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I hereby launch this book in Sydney Harbour." That was the best part of that protest. But here we had Expo '88 later in the year. We were making tourist art, and I quickly found out that it was almost impossible to make any money, like particularly out of artefacts, which is what we set up to do. And so we were looking at different ways of doing things, looking at doing different things just to survive.
So going back, you were born in Charleville and you moved around a lot growing up. And I guess you saw things that shaped you politically.
Yeah, well, I remember, as a young kid, really young, 5, 6, coming down to Brisbane. I remember we went out we were staying at Cooper's Plains in this sort of like aviation type building. Remember that pretty clearly. I remember landing in Darwin, where we flew from Brisbane to Darwin via Mount Isa. I remember getting there. We got there Boxing Day, I think. Boxing Day, 1959. Landed in Darwin. I was there for about 6 years, I think, and then came back, went to Rockhampton, went down, was there for a year, then went back to Charleville. Went back out there. By the time we got back out to Charleville, blackfellas were able to live in the town. They were living in the town at that stage. But then we moved to Mitchell and moved back into a tin shack. Yes. Just not long after that, I started went to school. I went to 8 schools. So, people, I tell people that, they said, "Gee, that must have been really hard." I can't remember it being really hard though. It was. Well, I just became adaptable, I think, just to constant moving.
And then 67, was it, when living in Mitchell?
Yeah. That was when the referendum was on.
Yeah, and when was the house bulldozed, your shack bulldozed?
Yeah, well, that was 8 months later. I remember the referendum was a big thing. Blackfellas getting dressed up and going down. Voting. A lot of them couldn't vote. But I remember the result, being sort of resounding. It was almost 91% of the Australian people voted in favour of that referendum, which incidentally was, the question was, should the Commonwealth have the power to make laws for Aboriginal people? It had nothing to do with citizenship or anything like that. Whether you had the right to vote didn't depend on the citizenship. It depended on the state governments, what kind of legislation they had. So, but 8 months after that referendum, the council decided that they'd come and bulldoze my fucking home.
So that was a local government decision?
That was a local government decision. We didn't have what are the superintendents or whatever it was that they called the managers of the reserves here. We didn't have a manager per se, but the council, in the absence of a policeman taking on the job or some other public servant, the council were the equivalent, and they decided that they would rather than send infrastructure over to, the Yamba, which had about 30 families, I think, and Little Cherbourg, where I lived, there was a few people who used to live in Cherbourg, escaped from Cherbourg, from the oppressive regime that was there, came out, made a home in Mitchell, and they decided that they would bulldoze our homes instead of sending water and electricity and like giving us sewage and that sort of thing, and roads. They decided that they'd just evict us all instead.
So the promise there'd be a better home somewhere else.
Yeah, a bit like today.
So, okay, so that would have got you thinking about politics at an early age, seeing your house get bulldozed. And then you moved to Sydney and you got a bit more involved in politics.
Yeah, it took a while to get to Sydney, but I can't believe my luck, that it did land there. And I landed there. I didn't have any money, and I was walking in Central Station, and I was thinking, what the fuck am I going to do now? And I was thinking about I needed to get a job, and anyway, I looked up and there was this black fella walking towards me, we stopped and started talking to each other. That black fella was Kevin Smith, well, he was into the Black Power movement, and he was actually at the time Gary Foley's bodyguard. And anyway, he asked me, what are you doing? Where are you from? And all this sort of stuff. Same things black fellas ask. So asked me where I'm from. I said, I'm from Queensland. He said, what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm on my way back to Queensland. And he said, you got a ticket? I said, no. I said, well, come with me. Anyway, we got there, went around to the Foundation for Aboriginal Affairs, which Charlie Perkins had set up with some of the other blackfellas around Redfern earlier in the 60s. And anyway, he took me there, got me a ticket back to Brisbane, and but the train didn't leave until the next day, so I had to go back to Redfern for a night. And he put me up in this hostel, this Aboriginal hostel, and I ended up. Smithy dumped me on his cousin who was running the hostel, Owen Carriage, and we went down to the pub. Went down to the I can't remember the name of the pub. It wasn't the Clifton. There was one past it. The Cricketer's Arms. We went down there. There's all these blackfellas there. Coming from Dalby, where we were a minority. White people were everywhere. Hardly any blackfellas. That anyway. Stepped into this Cricketer's Arms. And mate, if there was any more blackfellas in that thing, I'd have needed a torch. It was a fucking blackout. Oh man, my heart was just so happy. And I met 7 other blackfellas there, and the ones who survived were still friends. That was nearly 50 years ago. So I'm pretty happy about that. We're all still friends, the ones of us who are still alive.
And so you missed the train the next day? Is that the story?
Yeah, well, I was doing an overnighter. I did half a River Van Winkle. I stayed for 10 years.
Right. And then via Moree, you spent some more time in Moree?
Yeah, well, that happened later. I fell in love with this beautiful young woman. I lived in Moree. Took me 3 years to get to her, but I got there.
Yeah. And so we've already talked about 88, so 87, your brother Marshall moved to Brisbane, set
Yeah.
up the shop, you joined him, and you were talking about how you hadn't actually done any art before, and you're helping him, overnight you had to paint 200 boomerangs, so...
No, yeah, well, so the only art I ever did, if you could call it art, was stuff I'd draw in the toilet, fucking dicks, because so that was about it. You're working with Marshall. So it was the beginning of you meeting people in the arts industry, and they started. So from 88 to 1990, you had a pretty fast trajectory. You were, I guess you could sum it up that back 88, that time, the doors hadn't opened for urban Aboriginal contemporary artists. There really wasn't anybody. Sorry, not saying there wasn't anybody. Yeah,
but
I was lucky. The thing was opening up. There was Bobby Merritt had set up this art project in Redfern. Jim Boy Simon, I think Billy Craigie, Isabel Coe, and there was another couple of artists coming out of that. And then a bit later, Bamali got set up, and like that. There was a show, something 84, in 1984 at the Art Gallery in New South Wales. That was basically the beginning of the acknowledgement that art existed in the urban areas, even though Kevin Gilbert and Trevor Nichols had been working, in the scene. Before that, but after that, there was Bamali, Lynn Onus. They were sort of leading. They led the way.
Yep. So really, around that time, there was a whole generation of younger, artists as well. Getting established, ready to
breaking in,
break in. Yeah,
it was hard. The scene was dominated by old white men, and there were a lot of young upstarts and that sort of thing. And a lot of not so young upstarts like myself.
Yeah. So Balance 1990 was that era for Balance 1990 was one big.
Yeah,
break.
that was it was a big thing. Nobody talks about it these days, though. But I think the catalogue they only made one edition of it. I don't think they've ever reprinted the catalogue even. It was a pretty landmark show. Marsh had a bit of input into curating the thing. There's some stories there that
yeah.
I can tell if you buy me some drinks.
Well, I think the thing I remember was it early 1990 when the opening was, and for the first time in my life, here I am at somewhere like the Queensland Art Gallery with people wearing black pants and white shirts, chasing around, wanting to fill up my glass of beer all night, and I thought, wow, this is a great industry to be involved in. So it certainly changed my life, and I think, I was among that next generation of younger artists and arts workers that were ready to break into the scene. So, and obviously you were there. I was there.
I remember the opening really well. Wayne Goss was opening the thing, and as he was talking, Marshall, my youngest son, he had this really cheeky look on his face, and the water mall there in Crag. Anyway, he just jumped into that thing and just stood there with the biggest smile on his face, And I'm there horrified. And his mother's, get that little prick out of there. Oh.
So then you've got, soon after, you're exhibiting in Adelaide, you're at the Sydney Biennale in 1992. So all of a sudden, in that sort of 2-year period, a lot happened.
Yeah. Jesus. I knew I knew 4/5 of fuck all about art, so I thought, and I didn't want to go to art college, so I said, I've got to find out about this thing. So I just interrogated almost everybody that I could find, like who I thought knew anything about art. Sometimes I'd invite them to my place, cook them a meal, give them alcohol, drugs, and pump for information, so.
And then about 93, your first overseas trip as an internationally recognised artist?
Oh, I don't know about that, but yeah.
Beginning?
Well, somebody needed a black fella to go, and I think I was the only one with the passport.
So San Francisco, was it?
Yeah, it was San Francisco, and they got Qantas to sponsor this goddamn thing, and part of the sponsorship, was a flight to San Francisco and back, first class, my first overseas trip, travelling first class, it was ridiculous.
And who did you meet over there?
Oh, well, the most interesting person I met there was John Trudell, the native activist, was involved, in Wounded Knee, Alcatraz, and I got to meet him. So there was a show at Yerba Buena, the museum in downtown San Francisco. Went there and they arranged for me to meet this guy. He was fantastic, great host, and he brought along this page with some writing on it, this was his people's definition of their sovereignty, and it was like about half a page. And it was this really beautiful, poetic thing where they spoke about the land, and the interconnectedness, between everything and that sort of thing. And that was their assertion of their sovereignty. It was so beautiful. And of course, I've lost it. So I'll have to get somebody at the gallery to Google it or something, do some research.
Well, John Trudell, I did have a Google yesterday to try and find it, and of course he helped pen the Alcatraz proclamation, and so many things, and I guess he's known for so many famous quotes, and in particular, going back to the incident where he was protesting at the headquarters of the FBI. I think it was 76 around then.
Right.
He burnt the American flag, upside down American flag. Within 12 hours, his family home on the reservation was attacked with arson, and he lost his 2 children, wife, father-in-law, and he's afterwards said, "I was angry to start with," and what did he say? Yeah, see, that made me angry, and I wasn't real calm to start with. So I guess for him it was he went through this incredible trauma, and helped. Basically, pull apart. I mean, just dismantle the American Indian movement, because he said all it was doing was creating targets for the FBI, and he realised that there was other ways to do it, and it was art, it was poetry, music,
Yeah. Well, the other person that I met that was really interesting was Danny Glover. His wife owned the gallery where we were at. Got to go to his place, and his friend, whose place I stayed at, Yesufu Shango Sholo. I still remember his name. He was such a great host. Him and his welcomed me into his family. It was a really beautiful experience.
So by the mid-90s, you'd I think you brought lots of things together. You talked about those 500,000 tourist starts with an animal on a you know, animal on
you just get an animal on an Aboriginal-looking background. You're like, put it in a window. Put a backing board on there. Put a blurb about yourself on the back. Shrink wrap it, and away you go, mate.
Yeah, and then
selling thousands of those.
And the tourist can take it home and frame it in glass when they get home. It's already mounted, ready to go. So that goes to show you've always had some business sense.
Yeah. Well, look, I've been going to card schools, for a lot of my life. Yes.
So all of a sudden I guess you've got this balance between tourist art and fine art. So, and you started earning some good money, and then you lost interest in art for a while.
Yeah, well, I lost my woman, more to the point, and I lost my way, but, I found my way back,
And obviously when you did come back, it didn't, again, another quick trajectory. Within a couple of years, you're winning the Telstra Art Award, and you haven't stopped. 20 years.
I think, this projecting and all this, I think, I didn't do that deliberately, but that's what I was doing. I just projected this shit, sort of painted I painted that thing to win, I just fully had this belief that it would win, that sort of thing. So, but I worked really hard. I think Michael Ether, he's here tonight. He came and picked me up from Redfern, where I was drinking with all my mates. So I was living rough and sleeping rough at the time, and he offered me, a bed and a space to get back into art. Well, it was Tiriki Onus who actually got me, Lynn Onus' son, who actually convinced me to get back into making art. And I couldn't do it in Sydney. That town is just, it's like kryptonite to me. There's just so much fun to be had there. And so I came back to Brisbane. Whatever that means.
So we've got a screen here with some questions. So the first one is, what do you think the term Australian art, what do you think, of the term Australian art? Does it platform diverse practices, or will it be redundant in the future?
I see it as dominated still by Aboriginal art. That's why all the museums, they put Aboriginal art out the back, because if they didn't, the tourists would come in. If they put it up the front, the tourists would come and look at the front room and then leave. So they hide it out. I thought they was hiding it out there because that was their darkies' corner, where they thought we belonged. But they were much more cunning than that. So. But look, I don't know. Having travelled around the world to visiting other art institutions and that sort of thing. And listening to the artists and listening to the discussions, and looking at, reading and the discourses and that were just basically a world away from what's happening here. And I was really excited by that. That there was this similar stuff to what I was doing, was making headway over there. So I kept going back.
So even in the film, you mentioned the fact that the galleries, the institutions, they define your work as Aboriginal art, but you don't.
Yeah, well, see, Aboriginal art is different to Western art. You know, like same as Asian art, like Chinese art is different. You know, like and everything gets classified. You know, so but you know, we live in a world dominated by the West. You know, and their narratives dominate the art scene. You know, like even though you know the West, well, white people make up about 10% of the world's population. You know, that's a surprise to you. You know, like you look on television, that sort of thing. It's a fucking shock to me. Like, there's 90% of the world's population is black or brown. You know, like, so it's they're not European. And their art, you know, like there's just no such, like, there's no such thing as sort of global art. You know, like you go there, the infrastructure is all, you know, well, they're basically just loot rooms. You know, like a lot of them. You know, like just you know, stuff that the museums, you know, they're stolen property and all this sort of stuff. And they've got the narrative. They run the whole show, you know, sort of thing. So Australia here, you know, like I don't know what the fuck they're thinking here, because they think that they've got the best artists and they've got the best scene. You know, like, whoa. Yeah, so.
And is it?
Maybe this is why, you know, like I haven't had a solo show in any of the state institutions. You know,
Is it your politics that's the reason?
No!
I think I've got to go back to my first memory of getting to know you and finding out how political you are.
Here we go. Cunnamulla.
Cunnamulla, yeah. we left to Brisbane at, I think, 8 o'clock at night in a little Holden Barina. Richard's brother, Marshall, and I had to drive all the way to Cunnamulla in this little car. And it was just prior to the first ATSIC elections, and I heard Richard talk all night about how he's going to run.
That's a lie, that's a lie, that's a goddamn lie.
He's going to run for the ATSIC election, and his election campaign slogan will be "Feather my own nest." He said, "I'll buy cars for all my relatives and give jobs to all my mates." And he says, "Just be honest, you know." So, and if you had to produce those posters, I think they'd be worth a lot of money now.
Oh, I think if I'd have got in that election, I'd have been worth a lot of money now.
So you said, let's just be truthful.
Oh, yeah, but then yeah, I found out that I had to be on the electoral roll to be able to stand. You know. And I've never been on the electoral roll as an act of protest against Aboriginal people being left off, left out of the Constitution, and the inability of the colonisers to deal with us in a fair manner. You know, like a fair go for everyone, they reckon, but you know, like not for us.
So my mother raised me telling me that there's two questions you can't ask. One of them is don't ask somebody how much money they earn, so we won't ask that. And the other question is don't ask people how they're going to vote.
Oh, geez, I thought you were going to ask how big is your dick.
Okay. Okay. So I assume there may be a question coming up about people interested in how you're going to vote, but I'm not going to ask.
Good. Like the problem is with this thing is that the whole process, like there was not wide consultation, you know, like among Aboriginal people, you know, like there are people who will say that there was, but you know, like there wasn't, you know, like I know lots of, you know, significant Aboriginal people, and none of them were contacted to attend any of these meetings, you know, that sort of thing. So I know that it wasn't, and if it was, if you know, what we'd be looking at now is a very different thing to a very different document, a very different set of requirements would be there. The Yes campaign would not have this, you know, like, and we would not get what we want, you know, which would be treaties, you know, like, and the treaty is the only logical, you know, option really, simply because there are only three methods of the exchange of sovereignty under international law. One is conquest, two is accession, and three is terra nullius. You know, the first two you have to have treaties. That's part of the deal. Well, if your High Court rules out terra nullius, doesn't that leave you in those positions? So that's where we are. We're actually in an unofficial war. The Yes campaign would be better off petitioning the Australian government to stop the warfare against our people, to stop stealing our children, you know, to stop jailing our children, to stop poverty in our communities, you know, to sit down with our people and start talking about treaties. You know, like, and we Aboriginal people, we need to be thinking about these things. You know, we need to be looking at what it is that we need, what it is, you know, not what they'll give us. You know, what it is that we need, and then we have a discussion. Then we come to you and we say we want a referendum or thing. No, we don't want a fucking referendum. We want a whole new constitution. You know, let's have a reset.
So looking at the current Australian political climate, the next question is asking, do you feel more relaxed living in places like London?
Oh yeah, baby. Yeah, well, when you got the budget, yeah, it's fine. You know, like, back here, you know, everything's expensive. You know, like London is one really expensive place, you know, but you know, like the rents here are just horrendous. You know, like, come on, you know, how greedy is this nation? How greedy are the property owners? You know, they got the whole place for free, a whole continent. Come on, you know, like we've got to do something better than this. You know, there should not be one single homeless person in this place. You know?
So the next question is asking about your experiences overseas. You know, how has those experiences shaped you?
Oh, I don't know if they're shaping me. I'm just lapping it up. You know, it's like, geez, you know, like coming from, you know, abject poverty, you know, like to be able to, you know, go and sit in some goddamn restaurant in, you know, like in London, you know, like, and not give a fuck how much it's going to cost, you know, like, damn, you know, like, I remember, you know, like when I was going to school, you know, like, you know, I'd go to the school tuck shop, you know, like, and some white kid would buy a can of Coke, you know, I'd be thinking, I'm going to mug this motherfucker, you know, like, but there was no way that I could afford to buy a can of Coke even, you know, so.
So the next question is asking, I'll read it, sorry. Your vision is so beautiful and clear. Is it the learning that keeps...
Who said that?
Sorry. Is it the unlearning that keeps you focused?
I think it's, you know, the experience that I had growing up, you know, the experience I had in Redfern, the experience as an artist, you know, like it's a solitary, lonely business, you know, where you get lots of time to think, you know. We are lucky that we have time for contemplative space to think about the really important things in our lives. It was most people, you know, like they're so rushed, you know, like they've got bills to pay, you know, like, you know, they got rent, they got, you know, grocery shopping, they got electricity, gas, they got car, you know, the petrol, the registration, the insurance, all this thing, you know, they're running around chasing their tails, you know, like they haven't got time, you know, to think about what's really important to them, what makes them happy, you know, like well, what do they enjoy doing and this sort of thing. So that's, I feel privileged, you know, to be able to be in that position actually.
Well, I think you look happy and healthy, so I think it's doing you some good. So next one, what do you think about the different public arenas Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people can express themselves? Example, sport, music, film, etc.
Yeah, they're all good. Yeah, look, we've always known that we could compete, you know, with the best. You know, always. You know, like we knew that we was just as good as everybody else at just about everything else. You know, and somebody was telling me that Aboriginal people have the highest percentage per population of university graduates, you know, in the world. So, you know, if that's true, that's truly amazing, you know, given you know, where we've come from in such a short time. That makes me happy.
Yeah. So next question is, an artist's duty. An artist's duty is to document their environment. What are your thoughts?
Maybe I'm a bit slack. If that's the only duty that an artist has, I think I'll probably do a pretty good job at it, you know, because I'm looking at what's around us, you know, like seeing what's wrong, you know, like what. But I always try to look for solutions too. I think it's very easy to criticise, very easy to complain about shit, but you know, to come up with solutions to the problems that you think is much more different and much more appropriate, I think.
Next one, what advice would you give to young artists living in Australia who are unsatisfied with what it means to live and work in this place?
Get the fuck out. I told you I answer quick. Yeah, look, it's a problem, you know, like, and it's probably going to get worse, you know, like, we have this situation, you know, where, does anybody in this room know how many art colleges there are in this country? And how many students graduate from those universities? Well, I think there's 23 universities or something, you know, like, might be 24. Whatever it is, it's just one more than what's in the whole city of Boston. So, but you have a look. I'm guessing that, you know, somewhere in the vicinity of 100 students will graduate. That's from each school. So if there's 20 schools, there's 2,000 artists, you know, like come onto the scene, you know, like every year. And there's only so many institutions around. You know, whether they're studying, you know, art or art history, you know, like, there's only a certain amount of jobs here. You know, like, how long can the universities get? You know, like, we're playing this game. You know, like, you know, what are they contributing? You know, to, you know, like, are they contributing anything to the infrastructure that that is needed to employ these artists, or, you know, or are they just hoping that 90% of those people coming along to this thing is just spending their parents' money on a university degree, you know, so that they can get a wider understanding of life? Anyone?
Well, I think something I've always said about you is, you know, you don't have a university degree, but you're confident you can compete with, you know, the best academics out there.
Yeah, well, all that drugs and alcohol and food that that, you know, was paying off.
So we've still got a little bit more time. Shall we go a couple more questions? So, it's an interesting one. We all know you've just come back from London and your exhibition at the Tate. Did you have any conversations that surprised you?
Yes. Nearly all of them. So, like, because I never have expectations, so they all surprised me. But there was one thing that one panellist said that really struck me. She was a young woman from Bangladesh, and she was speaking about how the party of Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, you know, was banned in the 20s and 30s in India because they were fascists who supported the German treatment of Jews. And it's the same party, and they have the same policy for Muslims. And there's 200 million of them. And when she said that, a Jewish friend of mine was sitting in the back of near the back of the room, and I saw him shudder. You know, it shook me too. You know, like, just thinking that, you know, and there's already been, you know, like this has already started. So, you know, like, just look outside this country and have a look at some of the things that are happening around the world. You know, like, this is going to be a catastrophe of, you know, unimaginable proportions.
So, now, one more question. What social change do you hope to see from your art in the next decade?
In the next decade? Jeez. I want people to see it. What social change? Fuck, I want revolution. You know, like, this world that we have, this capitalist world that we have, is killing the planet. You know, like, come on, give it a break. You know, like, come on, just give us some socialism for a little while. You know, like, sorry to all the rich folks in here.
So I don't know whether you'll like this question, but how do you stay connected to your creative inspiration that is tied to Aboriginal land and create from that while spending so much time overseas?
Well, I'm getting away. Like, I'll be 70 at the end of the year. You know, just being Aboriginal in this place is stressful. So I want to get away. That's why.
And I guess it goes back to narrow. I guess maybe it's sometimes a narrow view of what Aboriginal art is. I mean, you're talking about international issues.
Yeah. Well, I think we all should be, because this is the only planet we have. our only place. You know, this thing about going to Mars and this sort of thing, that's just a fantasy. Like, it costs so much just to keep one human being alive in space. You know, there's not enough money to get more than, you know, the billionaires. There's the way the billionaires' numbers are rising, yet they won't have enough, you know, spaceships, you know, to take them all.
So I think we might finish up, and obviously thanking the Sourris family for enabling this to happen, and I believe you know about the Sourris family with their connections.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, from my hometown. Yeah, we were lucky enough to have a picture theatre where we didn't have to sit up the front, looking up at the screen, which happened in New South Wales, and other parts of Queensland. So thanks for that. That's really important. I've got a quick yarn, please. And Trevor, your brother told me this yarn. He said there was we weren't allowed to buy food in town. We weren't allowed to shop in town. Anyway, Shogun, and one of his mates was walking by, and they saw that the cafe business changed hands. And there was this Greek guy there. So he went in and ordered a hamburger. And paid his money. And anyway, there was this white fellow there when he handed him the burger. He said, you're not allowed to serve Aboriginal people. He said, he give me $1, I give him a hamburger.
So thanks so much, Richard, and thanks for all the library staff and the Sourris family that have all helped make this happen. So anything final you want to say, Richard?
Thank you very much. Thanks, Bob.
I'll grab a glass.
I was going to say you can go now.
Just one final matter of proceedings. We always...
Oh, wait. What do I get for this?
We got the receipt in the mail. Yeah. I don't know, you might be able to win a copy of this publication, Meet the Artists, in which many people in this room are featured in. And we do a lucky prize draw. So if anybody has a ticket with them, now is the time to get that ticket out. I should say, hello, I'm Gavin from State Library Queensland, and I'm the Director of Queensland Memory. It's my job to come at the end of these events and do the raffle. So, it's, what was the lady's name in Sale of the Century? Yeah, that is my lot, and I'm very proud of it. Okay, so if people have their ready, this is very scientific of it. I feel like no. Okay. All right, we have an orange ticket. B. 94. We got a winner? Come on, brother. Okay, just some closing messages. I would just like to thank, can we all just put our hands together again for Michael and Richard? It's an amazing series, this Portrait of an Artist, and I think this is one of the highlights that we've done of these events so far. I'd just like to give a few plugs. We have a series of exhibitions that are open at the moment at State Library of Queensland, and I'd just like to raise to your attention so that you can come back and enjoy them over the next couple of months. In the ALA Showcase on level 4, we have a display called The River City, featuring material from the Australian Library of Art collection here at State Library. And we also have the Working Country display in Dargan, which you might have seen at the prior to this event. So please come along and enjoy those exhibitions. We also have an upcoming exhibition called Purpose Built in SLQ Gallery on level 2, opening on the 2nd of September. So put that in your diaries. I'd also like to promote, we do have a shop outside, which is also selling copies of the book of Michael Aird's very well-known book, Brisbane Blacks, which is a foundational book on the history of Aboriginal photography. And I think it's, you know, a range of other resources which, if you're so interested, you can take a book home. You won't need a raffle, you won't use a raffle ticket, but we have FPOS and everything set up there for you. I'd also like to acknowledge the donors to the Queensland Library Foundation who've joined us this evening. The Queensland Library Foundation supports the work of State Library to raising funds to inspire even more people through possibilities, through knowledge, stories and creativity. If you would like to make a tax-deductible donation, so this is the plug to all those capitalists out there, is to donate to State Library's 2023 Real Rescue campaign or other foundation-supported initiatives. Please take a look at the brochure on your way out, or go to the Queensland Library Foundation website, or speak with one of the staff here today. And also highlighting that this is a tax-deductible status. This is the last Portrait of an Artist event for this year. We've run through them quickly this year. I'd just like to thank all of the staff who make this possible. I'd like to particularly thank Anna Thurgood and Olivia Robinson, who have brought together, corralled and given great care for this series and initiative. It's been 3 great events with Leonard Brown, Benita Eli, and this last one with Richard. I'd just like to thank everybody from State Library, everybody in the room who makes this possible. Thank you. This program will be continuing in 2024, so keep your eyes peeled for email lists, for the social media. We'll be promoting the Portrait of an Artist event. We'll be doing another 3 events in 2024. And I'd just like to thank the people that make this all possible. I'd like to thank James and Marika very much for supporting and continuing to support this great initiative to tell stories. Thank you. That's it. Thank you and have a good night. Thank you.